President Buhari engages Governor Tambuwal over security situation in Sokoto State.
We should take a step further and declare a state of emergency in those areas so that the military can actually carry out proper and effective and well-coordinated military operation with the backing of the law.
NYSC gives new condition for participation in national service.
In the next orientation exercise, all incoming prospective members will show evidence of their vaccination.
Return of looted artifacts. Oba of Bini receives deed of transfer.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss getting the discourse to work better.
Precisely on the 13th of November 2013, the federal government unbundled the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, PHCN, to 11 distribution and 7 generation companies, as well as Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN.
Now, the unbundling was essentially to reposition the power supply value chain through the involvement of the private sector for effective service delivery.
In the arrangement, the federal government retains 40% equity shares in the distribution companies, while 60% shares in the generation companies.
Now, also, as part of the agreements, the discos were expected to improve on the power infrastructure to enhance service delivery, as well as provide meters to consumers and thereby do away with estimated billing.
And to ensure that the distribution companies deliver on their mandate, the federal government has several times provided trillions of naira as intervention funds, but the issue of inadequate power supply and metering still persists, thereby becoming customers' nightmare.
No question about that, Kirian. Now, we also recall that as part of the federal government's efforts to ensure that the discos work better and remove estimated billing, the mass metering program was launched. Now, 1 year down the line, the metering still remains a challenge.
However, reports indicate that there has been some improvement in the generation value chain of the power sector, but the discos could not uptake due to poor and obsolete infrastructure.
Now, Kirian, it also has to be said that a number of the investors who bought the power firms borrowed huge sums from financial institutions to buy the assets, as they lack the appropriate financing. And, of course, they've also been struggling to pay back their loans rather than investing to revitalize power infrastructure.
It's not better to invest, to invest, of course, if you would invest to have return on investment, then before you begin to pay.
Well, it depends on the terms of the facilities that they took from the financial institutions in the first instance and from whom they borrowed.
And from all indications, well, many have also said that, look, it would have been better for a consortium that is sure of its own financing to engage in such deal than to depend on borrowing, knowing full well that the infrastructure, that there is infrastructural decay in the first place before you get into the deal in the first place.
Well, no question about that, Kirian, and that also speaks to the level of due diligence undertaken by the potential investors at the material time.
Now, the big question is, why should one venture into a business of such magnitude without huge sustainable source of financing? What is the level of investment by the discos? What are challenges militating against effective distribution of power in the country by the discos?
One other way to also rephrase some of those questions is whether the power sector privatization should be revisited, as has been canvassed by some persons, especially with the latest action in the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, where the staff embarked on an industrial action on account of the failure of management to fulfill their obligations to workers, and we then know what the consequences have been. Or should the government continue to provide intervention in the power sector? When are consumers going to get their meters to put an end to the notorious estimated billing system. These are some of the issues we intend to raise as we'll discuss getting the discos, not discotheques, by the way. Of course, we know that these are distribution companies. How we're going to get them to work better for the ultimate benefit of consumers. It's our focus on today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria, and I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I thank you for tuning in.
And I am Kirian Umayo, welcoming you to the program, broadcast live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As usual, we have complementary segments in the course of the package. But first, let's take the news highlights with Tessie Omeri. Hello, Tessie.
Hello, Kingsley and Kieran. Good morning. And good morning, Nigerians. Here is the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari may have agreed in principle to declare a state of emergency on security in parts of the country. Governor Aminu Waziri Tambuwal of Sokoto State dropped this hint while speaking to newsmen Monday evening after an audience with the president on security situation in his state.
From what I've seen and the engagement I've had with Mr. President, I can see that more in terms of engagement, in terms of strategy, is going to come up. And part of what I really suggested to Mr. President is for him to consider taking the advantage of the constitutional provision to declare a state of emergency in some of these areas that we have all of these bandits in Zamfara, in parts of Zamfara, parts of Katsina, parts of Sokoto, parts of Niger, Kaduna and Kebbi, those areas where we have them. Since now that the court has declared them as terrorists, we should take a step further by declaring a state of emergency in those areas so that the military can actually carry out proper and effective and well-coordinated military operation with the backing of the law.
And from security, let's look at National Assembly. Lack of knowledge about the functions of legislature has created the erroneous impression that an effective legislature lies in being antagonistic to the executive. These and other reasons are responsible for the low perception index of the legislature. President of the Senate, Ahmad Lawal, made this position while delivering the maiden Distinguished Parliamentarians Lecture Series organized by the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies.
Negative perception of the legislature can be attributed to a lack of knowledge and understanding of the role of the legislature and how it contributes to democratic governance.
I hope that it will present an opportunity to the legislature to remind itself of its mandate and the exercise thereof to all Nigerians.
Minister of Finance Zainab Ahmed says a major policy thrust of the Finance Bill 2022 is to close tax loopholes following the coming into effect of the Petroleum Industry Act (PIA). It was during her presentation at the public hearing on the bill before the House of Representatives Committee on Finance.
Our ongoing reforms of the past 6 years are yielding tangible results, and we need to do more. There's also the possibility of introducing new taxes, new tariffs, new levies, as the economy is now on a recovery path.
Finance Bill seeks to introduce strategic and broad-minded positive reforms that will engender best practice.
Federal government is willing to make more policies that will enhance and promote indigenous content in order to drive the digital economy of the country. Minister of Communications and Digital Economy, Professor Isa Ali Pantami, said this at the 9th regular meeting of the National Council on Communications and Digital Economy.
The major challenge today with regards to indigenous content, as far as I'm concerned, has nothing to do with government policies, but rather with the quality and quantity of our indigenous products.
To increase the economic growth and viability as a nation, we must be ready to expand our digital technology.
Only fully vaccinated prospective corps members will be allowed to register and participate in the scheme from January 2022. Director General of the National Youth Service Corps NYSC, Brigadier General Shuaib Ibrahim, stated this while addressing the 2021 Batch C Stream 2 set of core members in a virtual meeting.
All incoming prospective members will show evidence of their vaccination.
There's no chip or anything inside, so the COVID-19 vaccine is safe.
Nigeria is in diplomatic talks with the United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, Canada and Saudi Arabia to reverse travel restrictions imposed on the country. Minister of Aviation Hadi Sarika at national briefing by the Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19 says Nigeria's sovereignty remains paramount and mutual respect shall be guiding principle of ongoing discussions.
Once they refuse to delist us, we will come back to the PSC and sit down as a house and decide the next step to take in the interest of our country. There is bilateral air service agreement between Nigeria and UAE as a country. We have followed the normal diplomatic route to continue to engage UAE, to respect the letters and spirit of this document, and there are huge signs that we are getting to resolving this matter and soon.
The documentation process of transferring the two returned Bini artifacts to the palace of the Oba of Benin has been concluded, and the document has been officially handed over to the royal father. Nigeria's High Commissioner to United Kingdom, who represented President Muhammadu Buhari while making the presentation, re-emphasized the federal government's commitment to return all stolen artifacts to their original homes.
This possess artifacts to you legally, so help me God. Subject of restitution and compensation for the act that happened in the past.
All to get this victory by returning this back is a victory, a call for celebration.
This will attract everybody all over the world now to Edo State, to Nigeria.
And that's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kieran after this break. Thanks for watching.
Well, the housing solution we have developed is a multifaceted one. First, we have tried to lead a program to build what we think will be an acceptable and hopefully affordable housing type based on surveys we did in 2015-2016 and construction that started in 2017. And that's going on in 34 states as the National Housing Program.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Everybody knows the secret to good cooking is that special ingredient. The mothers know it, but does this new generation know it? Let's find out. Mothers, daughters, are you ready? Yes! Let the cooking begin.
Erisco tomato paste. Now we get home, now we get love, now we get children. We despise the world. With a meal so great and so healthy. You know we've got your back. Oh, with Erisco, Rigico, Nagico.
Ladies and gentlemen, food is ready.
Food of love. Tomato paste. Good food for the body. Yum yum for the body.
Erisco Rigico and Nagico tomato paste is made by Erisco Foods Limited, feeding Africans with healthy foods.
My son has always dreamt of being in the spotlight. That's why I give him Born Vita for everyday vitality that gives him the strength to pursue his dreams. Born Vita, strength to dream.
The counsel of our fathers.
My advice to these young people is please do not take us back to those harrowing days. You probably do not know what it is.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
The 2022 Armed Forces Remembrance Day celebration is here again. The Nigerian Armed Forces work tirelessly day and night to give us peace to go about our businesses. Some have paid the supreme price. Should we forget the families and loved ones they left behind? No.
I am therefore privileged to honor these veterans who devoted most of their lives, active lives, to securing the nation and the world at large.
So, let's support the Nigerian Armed Forces and their families, corporate organizations, government agencies, parastatals, and individuals. Let's show our love and support for our armed forces. They are our heroes. Buy the Armed Forces Remembrance Emblem and donate into the Armed Forces Remembrance Emblem Appeal account. We love you, and your labor and sacrifice will not be in vain for spilling your blood for us to live.
Now, let's talk business. 7 years into the implementation of the 10-year Sugar Master Plan, indications have emerged that the plan may have to roll over due to prevailing socio-economic implications. Details with Aleka Obanache Arwa.
Speaking in Abuja, Executive Secretary of the National Sugar Development Council, Zak Adedeji, says though tremendous investments in the sector have been achieved over time, scarcity of foreign exchange and insufficient logistics are slowing the wheels of progress. With 3 more years to go, over 200 billion naira worth of investments have been achieved through the backward integration program, with thousands of jobs being created in line with the presidential initiative on jobs creation.
If we fix the backward integration, the 11 million metric ton shortage we have in Africa, it is what Nigeria have capacity to fulfill. So in master plan percentage, one, apart from the consciousness and the well structure issue it has brought, so we've moved on in what we set out to. So the last 3 years, what do we have in plan to do? One is to review and to question some of our assumptions, whether that is what is required or not. And lastly, which I may not want to reveal now, is that by God's grace, we will have to extend the implementation period.
Looking ahead, Adedeji said about 250,000 hectares of land will be needed for cultivation to achieve sugarcane sufficiency in the country. And looking at Monday tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, Alika Opanachi, Arua.
Many thanks, Alika, for the business package on Good Morning Nigeria. Coming up next is Newspaper Review.
Bayo TAB is here with us, newspaper reviewer. Bayo, it's good to see you again today.
Thank you, Kiri. Good morning. Good morning, Kinsley.
Right, Bayo, good to see you.
Good morning. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's begin today's review by taking a look at the front page of the Daily Sun newspaper. Daily Sun, you have the following headlines on its window page. Lawan, that's the Senate President, defends cars and jumbo pay for lawmakers. That's one of the headlines there. Nigerians to pay more taxes and levies next year. FIRS nets over 5 trillion naira, upbeat on meeting VAT target. Gunmen attack police headquarters, kill inspector in Abia. Another 10 in Plateau Market, and strengthen your capacity to deal with crimes. IGP charges CPs. Stronger executive-legislative partnership will deepen democracy, says Buhari. ASU issues strike notice, demands implementation of 2009 agreement with the federal government. MTN and Mafab Communications win federal government's 5G auction. COVID-19 will no longer accept short shelf life vaccines. That's according to the federal government. And only fully vaccinated graduates will serve from next year. That's for the NYSC scheme. You have details of that on pages 8 and 27. We also take a look at the Nigerian Tribune. Nigerian Tribune has a story, COVID-19, that's the kicker. Nigerian Tribune now. It says, UK records first Omicron death, and EFCC bars on vaccinated staff. That's on page 5. And new finance bill. Federal government proposes 5-year J term for non-remittance of tax and other revenues. And Nigeria regains top crude oil production spot in Africa. It's according to a report by OPEC, and that's on page 6. 124 years after Bini Palace takes possession of stolen artifacts, page 15. Mixed feelings as Lagos earmarks 5 billion naira to kickstart monthly rental policy. Details on page 18. Kirian.
All right, now let's turn to the Nation newspaper. And above the name flag, Lawan, that's the Senate President, 13 million and 8 million allowances, not enough for lawmakers. That's on page 1. NNPC plans gas supply increase to cash price, page 4. Now, MTN Nigeria Mafab wins spectrum to deploy 5G. Bandits kill 10 in fresh attack on community. That's on page 3. Travel ban, that's the lead story. Nigeria UAE diplomatic row escalates. Airlines ordered not to fly Nigerians into Dubai. Flight bans will be sorted out next week. That's according to the minister. All that on page 4. Then Paris Club reform. Governors fail to stop $418 million deduction. At the foot of the nation, INEC will have capacity to monitor primaries. 20 die in Bauchi accident. All that on page 3. Let's bring in Bio now.
Thank you, Kirian. Let's start with the arriving 2 licensees now who have won the bid for the 5G network. 2 telecommunications outfits out of the 3 that bidded have won the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum that is to be allowed for the 5G network. The NCC declared that the MTN and Mafa Communications won the 2 slots for a total of $546 million. The executive vice chairman of the Nigerian Communication Commission, Professor Umar Dambata, says that after 11 rounds of auction, which lasted several hours, 197.4 million was served as the reserve price, and the bid auction ended with each at $273 million for each. The Minister for Communication and the Economy, Issa Pantami, clarified that the World Health Organization as well as the International Telecommunications Union, both agencies of the UN, have confirmed that the 5G has no negative effect on humans. The Oba of Bini, Oba Erudia Eware II, yesterday signed document for the return of 2 artifacts to be returned from Britain. They were taken away illegally about 124 years ago. The 2 artifacts expected to be returned are a bronze cockerel and Oba bronze head expected to be returned from the University of Cambridge and Aberdeen. An elated Oba Eware commended the role played by the federal government in the return of the artifacts. And he says the artifacts represents the art, the culture, the spirituality, and the glory of the kingdom. Oba recalled that it is not the first time artifacts have been returned. He said the first was in 1938 when the coral bead coronation regalia was returned to his grandfather, Oba Akinzwa. He recalled emotionally that on that occasion, Oba Akinzwa stood and sang and said, Obi Bemi Sagele Mayo, and the whole chorus, the palace, and all the audience, chorus Sagele Mayo and Oba Atokpae. The second was in 2014 when 2 bronze stools were returned to Oba Erudiawa. The third one is 2021, yesterday, when it is hoped that, expressed the hope that others in Germany and other European nations will be returned to Nigeria. Clarification has been given by the Senate President on the earnings of the members of the National Assembly. Senate President Ahmed Lawan clarified while speaking at the lecture series by the Legislature and Democratic Studies, and he said the monthly salary of a senator is 1.5 million, while that of an honorable member is 1.3 million monthly. 1.5 million monthly amounts to 18 million for senators per annum, and that for 109 senators, that is 1.962 billion per year. For the 1.3 million salary of a member of House of Representatives, it amounts to 15.6 million a year, and for the 360 members of the House of Rep, it amounts to 5.616 billion. He said the figures that was touted in public domain as salaries are actually not salaries, but quarterly office running costs. He also gave clarification on that. He said for a year, the running cost paid to a honorable senator is 13 million quarterly, while those paid to the honorable members is 8 million quarterly. If you add that one up, for a senator it's 52 million per annum, and for the member of House of Rep it's 32 million per annum. For each, if you add the salary of 18 million per annum, allowances of 52 million per annum, which means each senator gets a monument salary and allowances of 70 million per annum. For each member of the House of Representatives, a salary of 15.6 million per annum, allowances of 32 million, it adds up to 47 million per annum.
But if I may ask,
Yes.
why all these explanations? What was the need for the explanation?
Good. Now there is information in the public domain that the National Assembly is responsible for high costs. And he put this in the public domain to say that, in fact, the National Assembly is underfunded, and in comparative terms to other allocations provided to sectors on the arm of the executive.
Fine and good. Assuming you do a compare, of what Nigeria spends on running the National Assembly and what other nations do, there is this belief that ours is on the high side.
Yes, there have always been claimed that Nigeria's legislature, the cost of running government in Nigeria generally is the highest around the world. But there has not been data put in the public domain to support that contention. Meanwhile, in Kaduna State, the panel set up to investigate police brutality has submitted its report. Justice David Nyom said that they received 64 petitions. 19 were dropped for lack of evidence, and 7 were dismissed for lack of merit. The panel recommended for payment to 23 petitioners, amount of 274 million, and that was for award for deaths, injury, and permanent incapacitation. It's also recommended that erring police officers should be prosecuted. The Deputy Governor, Dr. Hadiza Balarabe, who received it, said government will study it and issue a white paper to that effect.
Well, wow, thanks a lot. I don't want to, engage in some chest beating this morning. That is part of the story that you drew attention to, and which was also one of our headlines and story in our news bulletin. That has to do with the former handing over of the deed of transfer of the artifacts that were looted from the Oba of Benin's palace in 1897, following what was then known as the British expedition against Benin. It was a war that was declared on the Benin Kingdom. Now, why am I saying this? In 2003, early 2003, I wrote an article in my column then in The Guardian, and the title of the article was Letter from the Museums of Loot. Now, what happened was that a consortium of curators of museums in Western countries indicated that, oh, it would not be proper to return artifacts that had been looted and that they were properly curated now in museums and so on and so forth. They gave all kinds of reasons as to why those artifacts should not be returned to their original locations. At that time, of course, if you went to the British Museum, to an extent, if you still go there now, in London, you will find looted artifacts, including the Queen Lydia mask that you have there. So I wrote that article, and of course, lampooned the curators for what they had done, and that those artifacts did not originally belong to them, and therefore they should be returned to their owners. That you cannot purport to be a better curator of what doesn't belong to you than somebody else who's the original owner. And that if tourists are coming to your parts of the world to view those things, they could very well also be coming to the countries where those things were originally taken from.
Yes. What are they curating? Something you did not produce. Something you did not produce, and you're now a better curator. I mean, it's a
better keeper of your stolen property than you.
Exactly. I think it's a good development, really. You know, what has turned out yesterday. You know, I watched the ceremony live on NTA. You know, where the above Bini is, you know, celebrating that. It is worth celebrating because over 100 years, you know, of looted artifacts, you know, being returned to the real owners. You see, this is one of the reasons why sometimes we say that, look, yes, we are an independent nation, yet there are other areas where we are yet to be independent. Exactly.
And just to also point out, as I said, that one shouldn't engage in chess between these matters, but just for the purpose of further elaboration. In some one or two art colleges in Canada, these matters are also indicated for reading. These issues relating to artifacts removed from their original locations, either by stealing, looting, or purchase, and then, you know, kept elsewhere for public viewing and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, I think that we also have to ramp up much more readily now to ensure that our works of art don't just get across our borders. Sometimes you wonder, Kirian and Bayo, whether some of these persons who are supposed to be guards realize the value
of those artifacts.
I know that the National Museums, you know, and monuments, you know, tries to get that. Sometimes when you want to export, you have to get a permit or a receipt for all that. But there is a place I visited once. It was an art shop in Cape Town, and I was shocked by the sheer number of works of art, bronze, you know, brass works, obviously from Nigeria. Obviously from Nigeria. And I mean, part of the interest in this, I should say, is that, you know, the guilds, the carvers and the bronze and brass casters guilds are in Benin. And I remember some of them, of course, were my classmates in the primary school. When you saw the way they were doing it, pure work of art. Pure work of art, you know. So that's
procedures. There are procedures for taking works of art out of the country, and it has to be approved by I think the commissions of museums and monuments, and there must be a certification which must be confirmed at the point of departure at the airports before it is allowed to be taken in.
Why even taking them out in the first place?
No, the others, because those who are engaged in those artwork sell some of them for their own livelihood. It's not all that are meant to be preserved at the museums. Some of them are supposed to be appreciated, possessed by others, so they are legitimately sold. So once you have legitimately...
Those who are doing that as business.
Yes.
The carvers and the makers
some of them.
Yes.
So there are unique ones that are preserved and kept in the museums. The ones that are meant to be preserved for posterity are the ones that are prohibited from being taken away, like the ones that were fritted away illegally abroad.
But see, talking about this, you know, Kingsley, you have a better knowledge of this, you know. Are there individuals in Benin who are doing this, or the carvings or the casting or whatever it is, as business?
Yes. Of course, that's why they are a guild.
Yes. Now
you have a guild of casters that you call it, that they are located on the street called Igun Street or Igueomo. Igueomo. That's the full name of it, Igun Street. So and they pass it from generation to generation. Yes. So that is their work.
And do they have the authority to sell outside Nigeria?
Oh no, well, no. People will come. Tourists will come. Yes. There are a number of those things are now produced for sale. But there are unique ones. It's not every treasure, every item that's an artifact. An artifact usually will be dated, and then an artifact could also be for a specific purpose. But for the general ones that you have that are produced, you could take your own photograph, for instance, and then ask them to make a bronze or a brass cast of it for you. And that can be done. And then you have all kinds of forms that are produced. But for you to export it from the country, then you must get a certificate from the Museums and Monuments Commission.
In fact, last week, the NTA Bini highlighted initiatives to help those who are the carvers there to introduce some element of modern technology to help them improve their artwork. And they were very appreciative of it.
That's right, that's right. I mean, it's, once again, to go back, you know, there are what we call bellows. The way you heat up this with coal, and then you fire with red earth, and it goes on and on.
It's a complex process.
Yes, melting bronze and brass and then casting them.
And the sorry, I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit. Let's just, I was talking about guilds just now. Almost virtually around the same quarters, you have the Guild of Carvers. You have them around the Besama and Oza Street. And then you also, in the same vicinity, all walking distance, a place called the Ikpema. These are professional drummers. You know, that tells you how it was, you know, the city was organized. By the time the British came in the latter part of the 19th century, it was the Portuguese who first arrived in Benin Kingdom in 1420-something or 1450-something, 15th century, by the way. And when they came, you know, they were shocked by the level of organization.
It was indeed the Portuguese that first, hit Nigeria, during that period.
That's right. And we had, the Benin Kingdom had diplomatic relations with the Portuguese.
All right, Bayo, this is the much time can allow us to take for today. We also thank you for coming. I hope to see you again tomorrow. This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. How do we get the discourse to work better? That's our topic for conversation today. I will get on that after this break. Stay with us.
NOA, for example, has succeeded a great deal in sensitization during the pandemic, and we have found the community mobilization officers most effective in the sensitization and in the advocacy campaigns, creating awareness on the coronavirus pandemic. We have done this through the production of jingles, which were very widely distributed in different languages, in English, in Hausa, in Yoruba, in Igbo, in Tiv, in Igala, in Kanuri, in Fulfulde, in Ijo, in Isoko, in Bini. In talk of any other language you can think of, we had translated sensitization messages.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The counsel of our fathers.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
It was the hope of Nigerians to have a steady and improved power supply when the sector was privatized 8 years ago. But that desire is yet to be realized as the power sector in Nigeria is facing numerous challenges, including governance issues. Oyemi Ajayi has a situation report on the state of the power sector privatization in the country.
November 2013, the federal government finalized the privatization of the power sector, giving room for private investments into the sector. This, the then government believes, will allay the cry of Nigerians owing to the epileptic power supply in the country. Hence, the distribution and generation subsectors splitting and sold to private owners. Part of the objectives of the unbundling also enhance power distribution in the country, as only the transmission component through the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, remains a public property. However, 8 years after, the power sector has not made appreciable progress as expected. This, analysts say, is based on the fact that epileptic power supply remains the order of the day in most discos, despite the huge amounts spent by the government and the huge energy being generated by generation companies. Despite the unsteady power supply, consumers continue to pay heavily without commensurate service by the discos. Consumers have continued to purchase transformers and replace damaged infrastructure, as well as meters, despite the huge investments government continues to make in the sector. As part of efforts to addressing estimated billing, the federal government launched mass metering program. But up till now, millions of consumers are yet to get their meters, despite the fact that some even paid for it. And the recent industrial action by the staff of the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company for failure of the management to settle their emoluments causing blackouts in the Federal Capital Territory has further raised concern on the operations of discos. This crisis led to the constitution of the Interim Governing Board by the federal government to oversee the day-to-day running of the company. President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, attributed the major cause of low or lack of industrialization in the country to lack of constant power supply. Senate President Ahmed Lawan, while reflecting on the privatization of power sector, expressed displeasure over the state of the power sector and called for its review. What is needed to make discos work better? Should consumers continue to pay for infrastructure to energize their homes? What is the state of mass metering program? What should be reviewed in the power sector privatization? These are some questions guests will be discussing shortly.
Thank you very much, Oyemi Ajayi, for that elaborate backgrounder. We have guests here in the studios as well as at one of our network centers to discuss this issue. Let's welcome Unana Malo. He's Director, Energy Department of the Bureau of Public Enterprises, that's BPE. Unana Malo, pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigeria.
Also here with us in the studios is Michael Falosheyi, is an Assistant General Manager, the Public Affairs Department of the Electricity Regulatory Commission. Mr. Falosheyi, delighted to have you this morning.
Nice having me in the studio. Good morning, Nigeria.
Kira.
Yes, also I'd like to introduce Kunle Kola Olubio. Kunle Kola Olubio, President, Nigerian Consumer Protection Network, and member, Presidential Ad Hoc Committee on Review of Electricity Tariff in Nigeria, and that was in August 2020.
My pleasure, thank you.
All right, and from our Kaduna studio, we are being joined by Idris Mohammed. Idris Mohammed is the Corporate Communications Department, Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company, KEDCO. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kirian.
All right, gentlemen, once again, I'd delight to have you with us on today's program of Good Morning Nigeria. Let's begin with the Director of the Energy Department of BPE. Some say that the crisis in the disco subsector of the energy value chain came to a head last week with what happened at AEDC, that is the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company. The workers went on strike on a range of complaints, and ultimately we saw that the company had been owing the creditors. And of course, there has been a switch in terms of management, and the board has also been displaced. But as I indicated in the introduction to my question, analysts are seeing this as a manifestation of the deep-seated challenge with the DISCOs. How is the BPE, which supervised the privatization exercise, viewing this?
Well, thank you very much, sir. What happened that day last week was a manifestation of something that had been happening within the DISCO for quite some time, and it was not out of hand, except that things were being managed and with the aim of bringing everything to a control until the control could not hold further. That is not to say that the manifestation of that issue is being replicated in all other DISCOs. The DISCOs are a small segment of the power value chain, and the reform that had come into the power sector was aimed at working on the whole value chain, with the DISCOs as the primary hub from which all other participants in the value chain fed. And the DISCOs become very important since they are the ones that get the money that services the whole value chain. If you understand the flow within the power sector, the flow of power and the flow of money, then you get the picture very well. And that is where the DISCOs become very, very critical. Getting to understand the problems within the whole power sector, you have to get it from the macro level and then the micro level. The macro level, there are issues at the national level that affect the performance of everybody, including the DISCOs. And at the macro level, there are issues that also affect the performance of the DISCOs within themselves. For instance, the issue of governance, the issue of use of technology, the issue of correct management. All these affect the functions of the DISCO. If you take it further, the issue of regulation also, how they are being regulated to produce the kind of services they are supposed to produce, also affect their functions. What happened in Abuja was a culmination of several factors that led to the eventual strike that took place. And because there were already mechanisms built into the system to make sure that such things as they occur, they are being taken care of immediately. The business continuity framework was activated in order to make sure that the utility continues to provide service to Nigerians the way it's supposed to be done. And that's what actually took place last week, sir.
Well, in the course of this conversation, you may have to elucidate on the issue of the macro level of the challenge or micro level of the challenge and what have you, because what consumers want is the adequate supply of power, irrespective of any challenge in the entire value chain, structure that we have, because the unbundling of PHCN was necessitated by the fact that, look, we want a change in that sector, and that change is yet to be felt by Nigerians as expected. That is just the bottom line. We will return to you. Meanwhile, let's go to Assistant General Manager, Public Affairs, Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Let's get your view about the performance of electricity distribution companies in Nigeria.
Fine. The whole essence of the privatization is for Nigerians to have power delivered to them. And that journey started with the National Power Policy of 2001 to the Act in 2005, and some progress has been made. Some of the challenges have been addressed gradually, but Nigerians are too much in a hurry, and rightfully so, to have the power delivered to them. The activities of the DISCO, the market aspect of it, is to be regulated by the Commission, and the Commission has been doing that. We've put several regulations in place. We've been monitoring them. The issue of metering that you mentioned, and this market is just about, let me say, about 7 years old in this whole process, and the process are ongoing. the discos are being regulated in such a way that to ensure that the service is delivered. You know, the first thing you have to look at is what are the issues on ground? Why is it that the privatization has to come in place in the first instance? And that was because at a point in time, the monolithic or the single NEPA, as it then was, and later PCN, government could no longer fund the activities of NEPA and PCN. So it's about cash flow, just as the director mentioned. You see, the flow of power, then the flow of revenue. If the money is not there, the private investors will not be there. So you have to put in place mechanism that will guarantee flow of revenue so that private investors will have the confidence to put their money on ground and to make sure that there is service delivery. And that is what the Commission has been doing to ensure that both the flow of power and flow of revenue, there is correlation between the two so that service is delivered to Nigerians.
When you say regulate, they're being regulated. May we know the elements of this regulation you talked about? Because they may be over-regulated. They may be part of that challenge.
No, not exactly. You see, regulation is to ensure there is a level playing field. The role of regulator is, number one, you protect the consumer to ensure that service is delivered, and also to give the service provider that comfort that when I deliver service, I will have my money. Electricity is just like any other product. It has cost of production. The only difference here is that it's a long chain, other than when you want to, let me say, to use a layman language, maybe you want to produce amala. But when you also trace the origin of amala, it started from the farm. So it is, the only difference here is that when you look at electricity, you have to string wire. Take, for instance, maybe stringing wire all the way from Port Harcourt to Sokoto for you to have electricity. And until the last bolt is tightened, nobody is aware if anything is being done. Unlike if you produce, to simplify it, like the amala that I mentioned, if you are able to produce yam, somebody has seen yam, you could be commended. So the issue of overregulated or not overregulated does not arise. The Commission has not in any time pretend to have a kind of, how do I put it now? No-haul. Most of our decisions, we take it to the stakeholders, including the operators, ordinary Nigerians. As I'm telling you now, that two stakeholders consultations are going on. So we are never presented to have a kind of a wonder boat or wonder knowledge, or every decision we try as much as possible to consult with ordinary Nigerians to make sure that the issue of this overregulation that you talk about does not in any way arise. We are
all right. Thank you, Mr. Falosheyi. We're going to return to you in the course of this conversation. And also thank you for the amala analogy that you used. You say that there's a value chain. It starts from the farm. No problem. The amala has been prepared, but there is no soup, which is why Nigerians are grumbling. There's no, whether it's begri soup, or whether it is ewedu soup, or whether it's, well, in some parts of the country, ofo with, okra. There's no soup, and that's why Nigerians are grumbling. And when you did say a while ago that the industry is just a few years old, it's not a greenfield industry. This is a brown industry. We had NEPA before, and sometimes these days there are nostalgic reflections about what ECN did and what NEPA did. Some Nigerians are even saying, look, NEPA days were even better than what we are having with discos. And that's why my question is going to Idris Mohammed, Corporate Communications Department of the Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company. Idris, of course, the BPE director here says that all discos are not rated uniformly. Some perhaps are performing better than others. But the widespread view, if you were to ask Nigerians, is that the discos are not giving joy to their consumers. What are your problems?
Well, thank you, Kingsley. Actually, the challenges in the power sector is not only about the discos, but since the topic today is centered on the distribution companies, let's try and see what are the challenges in the distribution arm of the value chain. Taking Kaduna Electric, for example, on a monthly basis, we do receive a market invoice of close to 7 billion naira. This is what we are expected to remit to the market at the end of the month. The cost of electricity generated by other participants in the value chain, and of course, that of the transmission services rendered by the transmission company of Nigeria, as well as other obligations. But as I'm talking to you now, almost since we took over this company almost 7 years ago, there was never a month we collect half of that amount. That is 3.5 billion. This indebtedness cut across all strata of the electricity consuming public. Private individuals, governmental agencies, ministries, departments, and agencies are almost every month owing huge unpaid electricity bills. If you take the public sector, for example, as at November this year, federal and the 4 states agencies in our franchise are owing Kaduna Electric almost 45 billion naira, while the private individuals, corporate organizations, and commercial entities are owing close to 72 billion naira. So this on its own is telling a lot in the ability of the company to discharge its obligations. And I believe almost all the distribution companies are facing similar problem, are suffering from this kind of significant shortfall in the revenue. The electricity value chain or the electricity industry is a very capital intensive one. Definitely all participants will need investment from lending institutions. But I'm telling you, no banks or no any financial institutions will, having looked at the books of all the participants, will readily grant any facility to this company. This is telling on the ability of most of the participants to carry out their performance improvement plans. We have a very wonderful, very robust performance improvement plans. We have submitted such performance improvement plans to the regulator. It has been approved, but we need to have the confidence of these lending institutions to enable us carry out these improvement plans. So one of the major setback in the electricity industry today is this revenue shortfall. Then, if you go further, you will discover that unauthorized access to even electricity services has become the order of the day today. Even the metering that we are daily yearning for, you go almost every day. If you go out, you see people deliberately and with fraudulent intention compromising the meters installed to ensure that at least they get value for their money. There is equally this problem of vandalism of power supply infrastructures. I'm telling you, as I'm speaking today, there is hardly a night will pass without us recording vandalism of this or that asset, power supply asset. This is equally telling on the ability of the distribution arm to discharge their obligations. If you go further, we need to understand this fact. I am happy the Assistant General Manager, BPE, mentioned something, that electricity is like any other product. It has cost of production. And where he gave an example of amala. If the amala producer spend, let's say, 10 naira to produce an amala, you definitely will not expect the amala woman to be in business if you force her to charge 7 naira or 8 naira, because she cannot break even, let alone having something as an incentive to enable her continue in the business. These are some of the issues. We need to accept the fact that these services has cost in it. And we must accept the fact that, look, if we want to encourage more people to participate, because we need more participants in the electricity business in this country. We need more investment. But the present atmosphere is not encouraging. There is no much incentive that will encourage other investors, other entrepreneurs to come and invest in the power sector. So this, it brings me to the issue of even the tariff. Every now and then, if tariff is going to be reviewed, we know what we passes through. But the truth of the matter is that if you take bread, for example, if you are buying a bread at 100 naira a few years ago, you cannot have that same bread with 100 naira today. So it's also the same thing with electricity. Money is being spent to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity. And where the tariff does not reflect the cost of these services, definitely not, there won't be incentive for investors to come and invest in the power sector.
All right. Thank you for your opening remarks. Kinsley, actually, he has opened other areas of interest with respect to the challenges that discos are having. I can't even believe the fact that the public sector is owing about 45 billion naira to Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company, about 172 billion from the private sector, and all of that. I mean, if that is true, why should you continue supplying power to such persons or corporate bodies if they're owing that sum?
I think you should ask him that question.
Yes,
let him clarify.
Maybe we'll return to him, because I want the man who is representing consumers to also speak. That is a cool caller. Fabio, you've listened to Olubios, rather. You've listened to exactly, and what is your take with respect to the performance of discos across Nigeria?
Thank you very much. You can't build something on nothing, and basically, the request for proposal by BP in 2013 for privatization, there was a global public mobilization of investment globally in the power sector, and no credible investor was willing to invest in Nigeria after all said and done. So it resulted in balkanization of the power sector amongst cronies and prefer bidders, so to say. We lowered the threshold. The BPE, after failed attempt to woo foreign investors because nobody was interested in investing in Nigeria, ended up giving it to some locals. From the look of things, the major problem we have in the power sector now is because the network of the technical partners that were used for privatization. Some of them were arranged, put together, was allowed as part of the component for bidding. Most of the investors on their own did not have any assets that they attached to credit line in any given bank, be it Nigeria or here. They only came with business plan, network, this is what they are able to do, and approach the bank for acquisition of license. Before privatization, because why we are saying this is that we need to get the fundamental issues, why we have issue of governance and what have you. You know, when they presented their bidding, they approached the banks for acquisition of license loan, which they got from some of the banks. But beyond that acquisition of license loan, they did not have money. The definition of investors in our own mind is that the public sector funding on power sector, the budget was considered too extremely high and wanted a paradigm shift for cash inflow. And this is not what we have. So they brought in technical partners. Most of them were just used for the purpose of privatization. They did not have resources of their own. And after all said and done, we now have the indebtedness of electricity consumers to NEPA PSCN. The agreement of federal government is that such money will be collected, paid to NEMCO. That was what was used as collateral. The collections that were made were recovered from the indebtedness of electricity consumer. Some of these co had it to themselves. Another issue that we're having, the present challenges that we're having now, is the issue of regulation. The BPE privatized the telecom sector, and it was a very successful story. And other sector, we are worried as end users that the BPE cannot be a regulator in the day and be board members of the disco, and they are still repeating the same thing. Every board member naturally are entitled to sitting allowances. In some places, $10,000. In some places, $20,000. Medical allowances and all the perks. So you cannot be the role of BPE in the privatization was strictly to monitor the performances. They were well funded, and still up to today, budget can make, federal government can put enough money for them to deliver their duty or responsibility. So BPE being on board as BPE staff is one of the major problems of the privatization. Eminently qualified Nigerians are there with high integrity, with expertise. BPE ought to do recommendation to government for these people to be nominated as board members, not BPE having conflict of interest. Now it makes it difficult for BPE to conveniently turn its face from issue of effective monitoring. Another area where we have issue is the NEC. The NEC officials have said that they have a lot of regulations. Yeah, there are a lot of regulations, but what about the regulatory follow-up? What about the regulatory assertiveness? If you have a sector, like all the issues playing out in Abuja Disco, will have been taken care of by the open book review. In Ibadan, in 2016, there was open book review. 11 billion was given to the management of Ibadan. The NEC, from their open book review, discovered that 6 billion was illegally taken out. And the board were asked to step down to the open book review. NEC had, to us to our embarrassment, we don't have consumers NEC. We have willing regulator. On the personal relationship, yes, we have good cordial relationship with them, but the major problem why we are where we are today is because the process was compromised. We did not put in the best for the privatization, and you can't get the best of results. Since privatization, consumers have been investing in network, government have been investing in network. The investors in quote have not really added value. The money they collect, sometimes they make 10 billion in a month collection, sometimes they make 15 billion in a month. There was a time NEC even lowered the threshold. They say remit 20% and keep 80%. The gas company, they talk about Amala. The value chain, we talk about the baker, the baking powder, the flour and what have you. They are the cost, the fixed stock for the production of a bakery, a typical bakery factory. The gas producing company, the OICs, whatever you are going to buy in 3 months, you have to make commitment in advance. You don't buy on credit. I've been to Minister of Power office, seeing some of the investors in generation going hand in hand to ask for arrears of their payment. They use their individual credit line to ask for loan to be able to keep all of us running. They generate, the IOCs don't sell gas on credit. So they go to the banks, approach the banks, buy gas on credit, they generate for us. When they generate, they pay in all. And when they pay in all, government is paying through the budget transmission company of Nigeria to be able to pay for the wheeling charges. The market is all supposed to be able to pay the value chain. Now, after all said and done, generation will generate, transmission will wheel the power to the supermarket. The supermarket who is collecting on credit, we collect 100% and remit 20% or say 30% minimum remittance order. And they keep the money and play around with it. So all these issues of regulatory capture, regulatory subterfuge, lack of regulatory assertiveness, if you have regulation on paper, if you have conflict of interest, how will we have the power sector? And Mr. President, so far so good, have invested not less than 1.something trillion US dollars, trillion naira in the sector that is supposed to be privatized. So we didn't get it right with the privatization, because even in some areas where I was at the public hearing on Eldorado Petrochemical, and we know Julius Bala and what have you, we know what happened. So we are not impressed with what happened in BP. So what we think federal government we didn't do right is that we didn't get the privatization right. We don't have investors. Sorry to say. We have rent seeking. They came in, the collection that have been coming in now has been their major this thing as business plan, which they've been using, and they were not even paying back the banks. The Abuja Disco experience we are having is the best of the worst. If you have a case in Abuja Disco, no matter the shortcoming, no matter the issue of governance, no matter the issues we may have with ADC, if you have complaints in Abuja Disco and you take up the management, you are sure you are going to get a resolution. In other Disco, it's hopeless situation. So whatever is playing out in Abuja Disco now, it's not exception to, it's not an exceptional case. It's all over the Disco. The old Disco stink. So what we need to do is that since we don't have the people that have the right kind of investment, they don't have the technical wherewithal, they don't have the financial wherewithal, they pleaded the network, the partners they have. It was just a Disco came on pages of newspaper where a wife of some of the cabal were paying $1 million to themselves monthly. So the hopeless thing. And if you have this type of situation, you cannot get a result. We sympathize with Mr. President. Talking about tariff, there are different cost elements. You talk about tariff shortfall, you talk about market shortfall. These are fixative. The gas that is being produced in Nigeria, the cost of gas that is produced in Nigeria is far, far higher than what is going to be sold at international share price. After you have included the cost of right, you have included the cost of all the variables. Why should it be? Those, the agency of government embeds, when they were privatizing, they were supposed to give partial risk guarantee, put call option agreement. They're going to give all manner of collateralization and securitization to the investors in the power sector, particularly the upstream. They were not giving, except Azura. They've been chasing them. So government reneged. When I say government is continuing, government have reneged on its part, and the whole thing was, the Indian model we have has been enmeshed with Nigerian factor. And this is why all this is playing out. A lot of money, the sectors is old, apart from leakages, we don't have billing efficiency, we don't have collection efficiency. Even the bill Kaduna is talking about, how did they arrive at it? When you give a customer that was capped last year at 3,000 naira per month or 4,000 naira per month, and now they are paying 15,000. How do you arrive at that? When you have capping. So NEC keep chalking out regulation without follow-up. So these are the issues.
All right. Kunle Olubiyo, thank you very much there for your initial pitch. Of course, you can see as we interrogate the issues, many more branches are emerging. Let's return to Yunana Malo, Director Energy Department of BPE. It's almost inevitable that we keep taking a step back to see what we got wrong. I mean, it's like you're building a skyscraper on the foundation that you have, It's not the pied foundation. It's not even the strong one. Now, there are endless complaints. You've even heard that from the National Assembly, that we did not get the privatization of the power sector right, at least with regard to one critical aspect, namely the distribution companies. Examples are usually made of what happened in the power sector, in the telecommunications sector. And we also saw yesterday what played out with the auction of the 5G spectrum, how the at least one of the older ones, got the license for the 5G spectrum. Did we get the privatization wrong?
Thank you, Kiran. And
I'm Kingsley.
Kingsley, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Kingsley, thank you for the question. And I think we have to look at this issue very critically. Where are we coming from? We came to a power sector that had suffered lack of investment for between 20 to 30 years when we started the reform. There were no investments. The last power plant that was commissioned was sometimes in 1978 or thereabout. And it became very clear that the sector needed huge attention. We did the reform, and we have to understand the kind of sector we are dealing with. Most of the required equipments are imported. It is an import-dependent sector. Everywhere, almost everywhere, every equipment that we put in that place has to be imported. So you have the issue of foreign exchange being a very serious problem here. I'm going back to the issue of the macro issues that are affecting this sector. So you have a foreign exchange market that is also very volatile, affecting whatever you're going to bring. And by the time you bring it, things have also changed dramatically, because it takes time to bring in these issues. This required equipment. Secondly, you have a banking system that is also not very soft towards investors. How do you give somebody a loan at the rate of 21%, 25%? You are already killing that investor. The only person that can take a loan at that rate is somebody who has something to turn around quickly and maybe give you back a large part of the returns on that business. Thirdly, we have an inflation spiral that continually eats deep into the fabrics of the mechanism that has been placed in the power sector. This was why the NESI, National Electricity Sector Industry Group, thought that the best thing to do was to work on the cash flow and make the cash flow transparent by making sure that the cash flow, the waterfall of these monies that come into the power sector are transparent through the central bank. That has been done, and it has provided the kind of buffer that you need in order to encourage investments into the power sector. However, these things are not stable. They are constantly shifting, and the need to balance up through the activities of government and the regulator is what is constantly going into the power sector in order to create the kind of stability that will make the operators also very comfortable. Talking about the other dimensions within the company that have affected performance, the issue is that when you do not have the correct management and when you have infighting among the shareholders, definitely it affects performance. And these are the things that you naturally will expect when you have investors come into a particular investment. And the modalities for controlling and harmonizing them is what we have put in place in conjunction with NAC to make sure that things are done in a way that runs smoothly. Talking about whether the foundation of privatization was faulty or not, the foundation was not the problem. The foundation was correct, because what happened was that there was a process of reform, which my colleague referred to, a reform that started way back with policy first. The policy issues were clearly defined, and that this is the direction we want. Then after the policy, an act was promulgated that shows that this is how we want the relationships to run. And then after all these things, there was an unbundling. and a test running of the process to see how it runs, even before the privatization program took off. When the privatization took place, look at the generation sector. The generation sector is doing very well. There is more power available. The problem is that for us to carry power from generation to the consumers, we are still having teething problems. So generation is private, transmission is government, distribution is private. You have a mismatch somewhere. And currently government is looking at the whole matrix to make sure that there is a seamless process that will ensure that investments go on every segment of the power value chain that will ensure that power is available to the consumers. It is not something that it can be done.
This morning,
yes.
Mr. Marlow, let me, and then gentlemen, our focus is on getting the discourse to work better. We know what government is doing with TCN. We have had them on Good Morning Nigeria. We also have fewer complaints from the GENCOs. It is just the discourse. That's why our focus is with regard to privatization. Kunle raised a number of issues. He said that when the advertisement came out, called for expression of interest, you didn't seem to have very serious investors from outside the country. If that is true, what signals were you getting at that material time, and were those then eventually factored into the ultimate auction?
It is not true to say that serious investors did not show up in the power sector. It's not true to say so. If it were so, then all the discos will have collapsed by now. The discos are doing, they are not doing 100% what we want them to do. For instance, after the liquidity crisis that was resolved, revenue generation by the discos within a period of about 3 to 6 months improved by close to between 40 to 60%. Depending on the disco. Revenue generation increased. Because previously, tariffs were not being reviewed as and when required. This process with the incoming of a more stable NAC now, tariffs are reviewed as and when required. And also, the performance of the discourse, you can see, is becoming different than it was before. If you go back to any of the discourse, check out the complaint levels, the way the discourse attend to complaints is different from what it used to be before. Why? Because there is an injection of a different management style compared to what it was during government. We can't say that there has not been any improvement. The discourse need the correct environment in order to for them to operate. You have heard very clearly what is being said about vandalism of equipment. How do you expect a disco to operate when, for instance, its own cables that are carrying live wires are being dug out and cut by people? And in some cases, even the people lose their lives in the process. This affects the performance of the discos. Some of these wires, you cannot just bring them and join them. Once you join them, you create the kind of problem that it continues to happen. What you actually need to do is to replace the wire completely. And that process requires investment, it requires money, it requires looking at all the issues within the power value chain in order to take the right decision. That is where the issue also of corporate governance comes in. That has also received great attention in the sense that we have caused situations where each of the discos has to go through a process of corporate governance review to show exactly where the lapses are in order to make them improve. So it is not that something is not being done. The only thing is that, like my colleague said earlier, that we are very much in a hurry. We want to see results quickly, but these things are things that will take time before they begin to manifest.
Well, gentlemen, from every indication and from your submissions so far this morning, there is no doubt that there is a problem in the discourse. There is a big challenge within the discourse. Akunle mentioned a few things. Conflict among shareholders. He talked about BPE staff being board members of some discos who are paid on a monthly basis. We also talk about conflict of interest, and then on the part of regulation, you have lack of regulatory assertiveness and what have you. I want to bring you in here, because if there's lack of regulatory assertiveness, of course, the management of discos would not adhere to what it should adhere to in terms of good corporate governance. Right. So, given the fact that you have mentioned some of the challenges that are there, which are inevitable in terms of, cutting of wires and, of course, stealing of some part of the infrastructure of discos to be able to carry out a good performance. That is noted. But then when it comes to governance and administration, I think we'll have more deep, rooted challenge in terms of governance. I want to bring you in here as a regulator.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Karen. Before I will attend to your question, I will like to put it to Mr. Olubio. When he was mentioning conflict of interest, regulatory capture, I believe that's not a commission that I represent, unless if he has a concrete evidence of what he's talking about. Regulation is not done on the pages of newspaper. Regulation is not done to play to the gallery. In the course of his submission, he was talking of assertiveness, but he started on a contradictory note when he said open book was done. Who did the open book? The commission did it. After the open book, what was done? An action was taken. And the discos, as a corporate entity, they can be sued and they can sue. After the action of the commission, they have their right to go to court and they are in court. So there's a limit to which I can talk on that. So to me, I think that submission is in a way, is a no submission to me, because in the way it started on the contradictory note that the commission did open book. The open book was not done at behest of anybody. The commission believed this is our job, and we did our job. Infractions were discovered, action was taken. So, so what better confirmation will you want in terms of regulatory assertiveness?
Are you satisfied with the performance of the discos?
As
a commission?
No, we are talking about performance improvement plan, which the disco representative mentioned. When you are trying to, you want to make your child to work, you don't tell your child to run almost immediately. These are Nigerian companies. Nigerians are working there. So you are not going to regulate them out of existence. These companies were formed. You need to make them to work. When they have attained this level, you raise the standard again. The standard are being raised every now and then. We call them, so okay, I haven't achieved this level. This is your next assignment. You match up. So, but if because you want things done in a hurry, you crash the system. You are, at the end of the day, the interests of Nigerians that you want to protect, we will have jeopardized that particular interest because you are setting a standard that is unattainable. You have to be realistic with your system. What are the issues? These companies, as my colleagues from the BPE was saying, there are a barrage of challenges when they came in. So you have to set a realistic objectives for them. So having attained this level, take for instance, as at the time these companies were privatized, they did not even know the number of their customers. Today, we can come on here and say, okay, we have 12 million customers. How was this achieved? These are those are, it may appear very small, but I tell you, an average banker today will tell you, I have so number of customers without looking at anything. But these companies started on a note that they don't even know where their customer is. They don't know their number. They don't know. These are some of the issues that are being addressed at the regulatory level.
I'm not cutting you short because you will continue. I know you've raised some technicalities, involved in this, but we're more particular about governance, administration of discos. Are there members or staff of BPE that are board members in discos? Are there staff of your organization that are board members in discos? Because if that is the case, then I wonder how you'll be able to now carry out your functions properly. Because if some of your staff are members of a board of directors in discos and are paid on a monthly basis, how will you now assert your power in terms of regulation? That's what Kule was talking about.
I think that's a very interesting dimension. You see, the process of privatization was very clear. Who can be board members and who cannot be board members. So I say it with every sense of clarity and assertiveness that no member of any RC is on the board of the disco unless if no staff of the commission is on contractual relationship or whatever relationship other than regulatory relationship with any disco. And we've been doing our job to the best of our ability. But in terms of membership of board member, the BP representative is here, and the position of the law was clear on the role of BP on the board of the discos.
Yes, if I may come in, I want to make it abundantly clear that government still owns 40% of the shares in the discos. Somebody needs to put an eye on the 40% of the shares in the discos. Government, the design of the power sector was clear that within a specified period of time, BP will hold on to those shares. And then subsequently, government took the decision for 2 additional members to be added to each of the discos as board members. So it is not the issue of BP staff being on monthly payroll of the discos. It's only the DG who is the board member in all the discos. It's not staff of BP. So if DG representing government in the board ensures that the interests of government is adequately protected, to make sure that the 40% is not diluted at any point in time, and to make sure that the correct decisions are being taken to run the company the way it should, that should not be a problem. And in any case, this issue has already been resolved by adding 2 additional members into the board. So it is not the issue of representation in this case. The issue is corporate governance, and that has been taken care of by, 1, ensuring that what is required in terms of corporate governance is being done. There have been 2 levels of studies to make sure that these things are being done correctly. The World Bank, there was a study by the World Bank on corporate governance, and issues were pointed out and taken to the discourse for resolution. A further study was also being conducted to reaffirm what that first study did in order to make sure that the correct things are being done. And that's why the issues that we are seeing in the power sector that are being resolved today are being done the way corporately it should be done. And I think that's a step in the right direction. When India started doing its own democracy, they weren't having it smoothly the way they are having it today. They had teething problems, but they kept at it. And that is why today they have become a democracy. Nigeria also has taken that step. We are following that step, and that's why we are beginning to see results. Definitely the power sector, with the kind of steps that have been taken, particularly within the last 6 years, you are going to begin to see results of the improvements in the power sector. It is the elements that are required, dealing with the weak value chain, the weakest point within the value chain. If you are able to get, because the strength of the chain is in its weakest point, getting that weak point dealt with, addressed and solved properly is what government is concertedly doing now in order to get the result that we want.
Thank you very much, Yunana Malo, for the explanation. But just before we go on this short break, I would like you to clarify. You say government then approved 2 additional board members. Are these the external directors appointed by government, or these are directors appointed by the other shareholders?
These are directors appointed by government.
So government now has 3 members
yes,
on each of the boards of the discos, right?
Yes, sir.
All the 11 discos?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, thank you. Incidentally, we will be looking also at aspects around the corporate governance of discos, maybe in the second part of this conversation, because many more issues are coming up, and the greater question, of course, has to do with improving the efficiency of discos. We are speaking all of this, and the consumers out there are, of course, grumbling and groaning over the challenge, and there's been the Amala theory of the disco challenge. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
We're trying our best to contain the situation, and in our operations, we've been able to make a lot of recoveries. We've been able to also arrest suspects that are involved in this kind of activities, and we've been able to also recover particularly arms and ammunition from those who are carrying it unlawfully and disturbing the peace of the people. But generally, our morale in the Nigerian police is always guided by our commitment to do what we have sworn to do. Peace and security must be looked into as a priority by all. To look at security as the business of all of us.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Nigerian youths are about the greatest asset the country has at the moment. It is therefore not surprising that the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari is strategically responding to the yearnings of the youth through multiple projects and programs. Youth entrepreneurship support years by Bank of Industry, the Youth Investment Fund by the CBN, and several other conditional cash transfer programs. Recruitment of 774,000 social workers, majority of whom are youths, and so many other projects that are beneficial to youths directly or indirectly. If the administration can do all this, definitely with a degree of patience and time, it can achieve more. Nigerian youths must come together to say no to terrorism, no to vandalism, and no to all disruptive tendencies. Hashtag Youth for Greater Nigeria, pacifying the youths, unifying the nation.
Finally, the hero of Nigeria's democracy has arrived. He shall usher us into a new phase of development, peace, and prosperity. He is the father of the new Nigeria, His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR. Welcome to another season of giving Nigerians hope yet again. We are sure of a great future for both ourselves and generations yet unborn. We look forward to your leading us as a nation into our manifest destiny. Though the challenges against us as a people are many, we know that your leadership shall set us on the right path to our greatness. A new dawn beckons on us all, and having you as our president is a precursor to this. Thank you for believing in Nigeria. This message is from the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
You're welcome back. It's still Good Morning Nigeria live on NTA's network service. We still have all our 4 guests, 3 with us here in the Abuja studios, and Idris Muhammad of the Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company in Kaduna. Idris Muhammad, this question is going back to you. There was a question we kept in abeyance. I needed to get the comments of the other guests on other matters. And that relates to the billing efficiency and collection efficiency. You raised some issues regarding the indebtedness of government entities, federal, state, local, as well as private entities to the Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company. And somebody is going to ask this question. I mean, you are a business enterprise. Why would you allow customers to owe you so much? What is your recourse in the first place? And how do you collect your bills? Which leads us to the other very critical question. If you had meters, and those meters were running, would you be talking about those debts?
Thank you, Kingsley. Let me respond to the first part of your questions by making this analogy. Will it be rational and practically possible for, let's say, Kaduna Disco to disconnect the headquarters of the 1 Division Nigerian Army or the Armed Forces Command and Staff College in Jaji, or let's say the headquarters of the 8th Division in Sokoto, or any military formation for that matter? Or does it portray any company in a very good light? For example, if we just go ahead and disconnect general hospitals or water formations, or we just walk to the government house and put the state seat of power, or where the chief security and chief executive officer of a state is in darkness. These are some of the issues. You see, honestly speaking, it pains one that Nigerians are not getting what they rightly deserved in terms of our electricity services. But the truth of the matter is that we need to draw a line. We need to depart from that inglorious past where we assumed erroneously, indeed, that we can have these services at next to nothing price. We must accept the fact that if we really want efficiency in the service delivery, we must pay for these services. So, coming to your question, yes, we are not just folding our arms and just watching this debt grow. We are doing a lot to ensure that we recover this money. But the truth of the matter is that where you have more receivables than the revenue, the actual revenue, it is not an incentive. It will never create that encouraging atmosphere that even your partners will be willing to do business with you. So, and if you talk about metering, yes, metering is a step in addressing this revenue shortfall. But if you recall, I said something. In the last 6 or 7 years, Kaduna Electric have deployed, of course with our Mr. Asset Provider partners, we have deployed over 250,000 meters. But out of this number, I am telling you, close to half of it have been compromised deliberately. Because some people erroneously assume that having meter will make me pay less. No, meter is not about making you pay less or more. Meter is about ensuring that you pay for the actual energy you consume. So, where meters, there are situations where meters are installed, give it a few weeks or a few months, go back, you will discover that the customer has either bypassed the meter or he has tampered with the meter so that at the end of the day, he wants to use 10,000 naira worth of electricity, but he wants to only pay 2,000 naira. We have it almost every day. In fact, if you are in Kaduna, I will even invite you today. Let's walk to any street. I'm assuring you that before we count 10 houses, you will discover that 2 or 3 were are caught with this kind of offenses. This is the problem. And if in the last 6 years, for example, if we have deployed, let's say, 250,000 meters, if half of those meters were not compromised, that means we'll have gone further. But now, anytime a meter is compromised, we will now be forced to look for another meter to replace that meter that was compromised. So every now and then, we'll be where we were 6 years ago, instead of moving forward. Then this even lead me to the comment made by my brother, Mr. Kunle, that how did we came about this huge outstanding? After all, there are situations where customers were capped, according to him, 3,000 naira, but we billed them 15,000 naira. Well, of course, he knows, much as I do, that there are issues on this capping too. There are a lot of controversy back and forth on the capping, but be that as it is, I want to emphatically say as far as the billing is concerned, we have always allowed our customer who have genuine complaint about the billing to come forward, and those complaints are being addressed. I cannot just sit down here and say, no, there are never a time where a customer is being wrongly billed or something like that. No, there are instances where a customer, but the aggregate is that I'm telling you, most this outstanding is as a result of default in the payment of the bill. Let's look at it this way. We have close to 600,000 registered customers, but every one of these 600,000 customers is expected to pay his electricity bills every month. But most often you will discover that half of this number will pay this month, while the half will default, and another half will pay another month, another half will default. These are some of the challenges. It is expected that we have 12 months in a year. So if a customer is up to his responsibility, if you are reviewing, let's say, 2020 bills, you should have a customer with 12 receipts. That means he has at least paid every month in those 12 months. But that is not the situation. Most often, you confront a customer, he will tell you, I'm paying my bill. Let me see your receipt. He will, in 12 months, he will hardly give you 6 receipts.
Why do I need a receipt?
All right. Thank you. Thank you indeed. But I may just have to, take us back to a few things you said. You said that Kaduna Electric, as you call it, has distributed about 250,000 meters. Now you have over 600,000 customers. Well, that is just not substantial in a way, because if 600,000 customers as against 250,000 meters. On the issue of compromising meters, I think you have the power to arrest people who are criminally minded, because for me that's a criminal offense, right? And on the issue of not cutting off power from military formations, general hospital, water, these entities have their budget for power. They have their budget for power. And if you keep allowing them to continue, perhaps you are going to be indebted forever, from all indications. Because if you spare them, because it's a government house or military formations, as the case may be, of course, you are going to be owed forever, as the case may be. Kunle, let's bring you in here.
Kirian, I know you are going to Kunle. Just to also throw in this point, when there is no power to these installations you talked about, and they have to use their generating sets, do they also buy their diesel on credit?
Oh, that's a big question.
Very interesting one, Kingsley. You see, in this country, a lot of funny and amusing things do happen, and I find.
All right, thank you. I hope we will have time for you, perhaps tomorrow, when we'll do a second leg of this conversation. Kunle, come in here. Now, this is what I want you to talk about. The issue of house owners or business owners buying poles, buying cables. Even at some points, I know I've once contributed money for the purchase of a transformer, as the case may be. I don't know. These are some of the items that these girls are supposed to provide, but individuals do provide them.
Yeah, but beyond the rhetorics of this discussion and the beauty of this discussion, the main issue to us as end users is that in 2013, when we privatized Paradigm Shift, the average load utilization was 3,500 megawatts of grid. I was a member of the Technical Investigative Panel of Power System Collapses, System Stability and Reliability in 2013. And we know that because of the weakness of transmission grid infrastructure, if we exceed 5,800 megawatts, the grid will collapse. obsolescence of infrastructure, the safety valves, different layers of system protective devices, they are weak. And so government have been doing, you know, Mr. President, from his background, is not an expert in power. He has done so much. He has given brownfield for TCN. Every money they ask for, he has given. Take, for example, the Mambila. If not until recently, they were telling us that they were listing Mambila for Mr. President to be commissioned in 2023. And Mambila site, no access road. Can you imagine? Before now, they will tell us generation level is very low during Harmattan. That's why we don't have power supply. During rain season, and the bulk of power comes from power station, gas fire. So there are a lot of insincerity in the sector. That is why those of us who are not contracted to the system, who are not part of the system, that is why it is very easy for us to come out and tell Mr. President the truth, because we don't have vested interest. Talking about the issue with this, my brother in BP, I will not spare him. I want to just give it back to him quickly before he leaves for the DG. The DG is not a staff of BP, but what we are seeing, the allegation we are getting, public perception that is having negative impact. You can imagine the BPE, a board member naturally is entitled to allowance. 10 in Port Harcourt Disco, about $10,000 to $20,000. If you are a lecturer, you are a general, and your position, your leg is weak or is compromised, you will not be able to look at the books and do the right thing. Now what we are proposing is, in 2013, we expected that by 2018, 5 years after, there will be midterm review of privatization. You talk about 2 board members. Engineer Kamnoni was nominated to JOS and several others. They've not been allowed to assume their position. It's still BPE. When there are issues of regulation, where you have BP and NEC, BP will be acting as if it's a staff of the disco. Speaking for the disco, be in the top of the disco. So that is what we are saying about conflict of interest. If you are a board member, you are being paid, sitting around 20,000, you are being paid medical allowance, you are being paid cruise for vacation, you are being given contract slot, you are being given employment slot. In the daytime, you'll be a regulator, in the night, you'll be a contractor. So that is conflict of interest. So this did not happen in the telecom sector. That's why we are getting it right. What we are here as end users is that we are not interested parties. We are not contractors, and we are here to tell Mr. President, like we have been doing through several correspondences, emails, and what have you, the truth. Nigerians deserve better power sector. And the way out is we want midterm review of privatization. That will address the issue. We want the present equity of the investors after in the review to be diluted to 30%. If it's diluted to 30%, they lack the resources because they are putting their money. We don't want to send them packing. We want to appreciate their effort. Let them take 30%. The remaining 70%, government should pull out its equity. If government is no longer there, there will no need for BP to be on board.
Okay.
Now the 70% should be quoted on the stock exchange for initial public offering.
Okay. All right.
So that all this will address the issue of governance, because we are not getting it right. Since 2013, all the money we are putting in, we cannot exceed 5,800 megawatts.
All right, Kunle, thank you very much for your view. Of course, this is a time-bound program. We are going to have to return to this subject matter to continue, because there are many other ramifications for us to discuss. Perhaps a couple of you who are here today could also be part of that, depending on what the production crew decides. But I'm just wondering, let's get your closing thoughts, Yunana Malo, with regard to this, very briefly.
Thank you very much. I just want to make it clear that government has been working to resolve the issues within the power sector. For instance, the portion of the tariff that these calls could not charge, because government has said the tariff should not go beyond so limit, which we call the market shortfall. Government has taken responsibility for that, and in order to clean up the books of the discos and make them attractive. Secondly, the issue of power theft is a very serious problem, and the issue of a legislation that will make it a criminal offense and a very serious offense if anybody steals power is what we've been calling for in the power sector, and I think the legislators are looking at this. The next thing is MDA debt. The Honorable Minister of Finance has already made provision for these debts to be paid, all the ministries, departments, and agencies, their debts to be paid, and also a mechanism to ensure that these payments are done as and when due, taken from their budgets on a monthly basis. And in order to cure the infrastructure...
When will it just be paid? Any time limit?
In fact, the first tranche is supposed to have been paid by now. By the records of what I know, the first tranche. Then the last one that I want to speak on is infrastructure renewal. A lot of money has, just like Kunle said, a lot of money has gone into the renewal of the transmission. However, transmission takes a long time before you can resolve.
Okay.
One project requires at least 18 months before you can see results.
Malo,
yes.
Director, Energy Department, BPE, would like to thank you for being part of the conversation today. As I said, we probably will require your attendance again when we are getting the second part of this conversation. Our focus has been on the DISCOs, not on TCN or the GENCOs, even though it's a value chain. Thank you very much, Inanna Malo. We also like to appreciate Michael Falosheyi, AGM Public Affairs of the Electricity Regulatory Commission. Thank you very much also for the Amala theory of DISCO challenge. We also like to thank Kunle Kola Olubiyo, President, Nigeria Consumer Protection Network, and member Presidential Ad Hoc Committee on Review of Electricity Tariff. We appreciate your attendance. Idris Muhammad, Corporate Communications Department of KEDCO, that's the Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company. Gentlemen, we appreciate your participation. Watch out for part 2 of this conversation on Good Morning Nigeria. Today, deep thanks for being with us. Tomorrow we are back same time, 7 in the morning. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Kirin Umayo. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.